evidence emerged this week in the case of Daniel Penny, the Marine veteran charged in the 2023 choking death of a homeless black man on the New York City subway. For context, then 24-year-old Penny was on his way home from college when Jordan Neely, a homeless man with documented mental health issues, entered the same subway car that Penny was on. According to witnesses, Neely began shouting, and some of the threatening quotes attributed to him include, "I'm going to kill you." Penny then intervened. He put Neely in a chokehold for more than 6 minutes. Neely was pronounced dead at the scene. Penny, who was arrested and charged with second-degree manslaughter and negligent homicide, faces 15 years behind bars, and he pled not guilty.
The trial began in October, and this week the defense team brought in a forensic pathologist who testified in court that the evidence doesn't support the chokehold being the cause of death. Last week, prosecutors presented the jurors with video of police interrogating Penny. Let's take a look at some of that.
I was on there. I forget what stop it was at, but some guy came in, he's like, whipped his jacket off, and he's like, "I'm gonna kill everybody, I can go to prison forever, I don't care, I don't do this." At that point, I looked to the person next to me like, "Hey, just hang on to this phone for me." I had my headphones in and took it off, and just kind of like grabbed him from behind, because he came in, just to like, because he was acting like a lunatic, like a crazy person. So, and he was rolling around the floor, and at that point the train stopped. I was like, "Someone call the cops," and he's still like rolling around, still going crazy. I had two other guys kind of help me, just kind of keep him from going nuts, and yeah, that's when you guys came.
Joining us now to discuss further is Olivia Reingold, reporter for the Free Press, who first obtained this video of the interrogation. Olivia, thank you for joining us. Let's start right there with the interrogation video. My understanding is that this was actually put into the record from the prosecution as opposed to the defense. What is your read on that? I saw you said on X that the prosecution was probably thinking this was going to help them, help their case with showing Daniel Penny talking about the incident, but perhaps they miscalculated because in this video he does seem to be talking about trying to protect fellow passengers from Jordan Neely.
So I think that the prosecution was thinking here that because there are a few instances in which Penny does describe what he did, I think he uses this quote, something like, "I put him out," something like that, where there are words that he uses to describe the force that he used. And so I think that that is the prosecution's motive here in why they're interested in it. But what they fail to realize is that just as many people watch this video and they see a hero who protected a train full of people.
I mean, perhaps they do, Olivia. I mean, I think obviously there are two separate issues here. There is the narrative around this case, of which, as you've noted, there are two separate narratives. And then there is the question of Daniel Penny's criminal culpability or otherwise, and he has his day in court there. I'm just legitimately curious, and it's not intended as a sort of a gotcha question, but you know, whenever you were writing about the interrogation in the Free Press, you talk about what part of what we've just seen, and you say that Penny waives his rights to an attorney and to remain silent, ostensibly because he thinks he has nothing to hide. But then the questions begin, and they're not about Neely, a schizophrenic with a long arrest record. They're about him. Him, of course, being Daniel Penny. I mean, Jordan Neely, although Daniel Penny didn't realize it, was dead at that point, and he was dead following Daniel Penny putting him in a chokehold. So why wouldn't they? I mean, if I put someone in a chokehold and I knew that person had been injured and they were actually dead, I would expect the questions to be about my conduct. I wouldn't expect the questions to be about the background of the person that I just killed.
Right. I do understand that. An important caveat is that Daniel Penny did not know that Jordan Neely had died at that point. So at this point in the timeline, Jordan Neely has been transported to a nearby hospital. The police have not informed him that Jordan Neely has died. But obviously, you know, Jordan Neely goes unconscious, and Daniel Penny surely is aware of that much. When I was writing that, I'm really writing it from the perspective of Daniel Penny, because you can see the two dueling narratives that are at the heart of this case in that video, where Daniel Penny, he clearly comes in thinking he's a witness to this man. He describes him as a lunatic who was, quote, threatening people. Witnesses have corroborated that they were terrified. But Daniel Penny clearly thinks that he's coming in as a good Samaritan, a witness, and that's probably why he waives his Miranda rights. But really what I wanted to write about is you kind of see him starting to realize, whoa, these questions I'm getting are not that of a witness. They are more that of a suspect. And so his entire life, you can kind of see him realize it's kind of him realizing what you just said. And that, of course, is that what you just asked me kind of is the heart of this case, is whether or not Daniel Penny should be held liable for intervening in rising lawlessness, whether or not he can be faulted for doing the job that some people think police should have been there to do in the first place.
Let's dig in a little bit further into what actually killed Jordan Neely, because that has been another question at the heart of this case. One of the bombshell revelations was that he did still have a pulse, reportedly, when he was recovered by EMS after this chokehold incident. And then there's been speculation, I don't know how much of this has come out in the trial, please illuminate us, as to his past medical history, as well as this potentially being some kind of drug-induced episode, which could have led to cardiac arrest. Talk to us about what's been going on in the trial related to Jordan Neely's actual death.
So it actually has almost gotten kind of metaphysical at times in the trial about like, what is death? How do you even know the precise moment that someone did die? Because it actually is quite hard to pin down when Jordan Neely actually died. But the medical examiner testified and did have an explanation as to why paramedics were able to find a pulse when they first arrived. And the medical examiner, who was a witness for the prosecution, she claimed that that is normal, that if you die of asphyxiation, that you can continue to pump for, a couple minutes. And so she said that paramedics were able to find a weak pulse, but that he was still dead or dying at that time, if that makes sense. So that is how the prosecution feels. But on the other hand, the defense, presented thousands of pages of medical records from Jordan Neely that just show, how troubled and tragic his life was. He had a long history of K2 abuse and actually, walked into the multiple emergency rooms at times because he had ingested so much K2. We've been learning throughout this trial, I didn't know a lot about K2. It's a synthetic form of marijuana, but experts have testified that the impact is more like cocaine. It's more like a stimulant. And so anyway, Jordan Neely, the medical examiner did say that once the full toxicology reports came back, which she did not wait for to declare his reason for death, by the way, but that the full toxicology reports did reveal that he was likely high on K2 when this altercation happened. And so there's that. There's also the fact that he has sickle cell trait and was likely in what's called a sickling state when this occurred. And so the defense at least believes that, this confluence of things, the fact that he's schizophrenic and could have been having a psychotic break, the fact that he was on K2 at the time and in a sickling state, which can impact your ability to process and, distribute oxygen throughout your body. The defense believes that it's not the chokehold that killed him. And they put forth a forensic expert yesterday who actually testified that.
Olivia, just to finally sort of go to the big picture in all of this, I suppose, like your reporting, which, to be clear, extends beyond the interrogation video, and you've written about this case before. On one hand, I take the point that there's a whole context and a whole narrative to this, and certainly, Jordan Neely had a very tragic life in many ways, and his mother was murdered, and he testified at a murder trial of her boyfriend and all of that. And there are absolutely really serious questions about whether the mental health systems failed him and all the rest of it. I suppose, though, on the philosophical level, what I worry about sometimes when there's such attention paid on whether he was a drug user or on whether he had a history of threatening people, is that if we start down that road, aren't we giving citizens the right to manhandle other citizens, or in this case leading to the man's death, and then sort of retrospectively say, well, it matters less because the person they killed had other issues? Like, that's the danger to me, that it creates leeway for forms of vigilantism, basically.
I do understand that perspective, but at the same time, I think that's what supporters of Daniel Penny would say, is that they don't take issue with the fact that he had schizophrenia or was abusing K2. I think they take issue with the fact that witnesses have described him as dangerous, and that, you know, he was threatening. And so it's really the behavior. It's not to stigmatize anything he was going through, because, as you pointed out, he led an incredibly tragic life. It's heartbreaking what happened to his mother. You know, he had to witness this horrible, horrible trial. And so it's not to downplay that. But there, at the same time, there is no denying that witnesses in saying, like, you know, a homeless man stumbles onto a train and people are like, ew, yucky, like, oh my gosh, this is so uncomfortable. It's more an immediate sense of danger. I would say that the other thing, I think, is like, why should we live in a world in which we expect this to happen again? I think the idea here, and so that are not having a psychotic break in public. So anyway, I guess I would just reframe it and say, I do understand why you would be concerned about, you know, civilians taking matters into their own hands, but I don't think that these situations should be playing out in the open. I mean, I just took notes. So just this week in New York City,
Olivia,
a tourist was stabbed in broad daylight on the Upper West Side.
We're encountering some technical difficulties, I think, with your audio. I'm not sure if that's on your end or our end, but given, you know, the sensitivity of the topic, and I don't want to misrepresent you or to miss any crucial points, it's been a great conversation, and we appreciate you joining us. And thanks for all your insights. We'll leave it there, if that's okay.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sure.